I'm with Alan Collins, following up. He's the English lawyer representing about 50 plus the survivors out de la Garenne. And there's now a new case since we last spoke, the famous Jimmy Savile case, and extraordinarily he's even representing some people in the Channel Islands arising from that. Give us an overall, what's the situation?
Well, at the moment I'm still meeting people who say that they were abused by Savile, so that's taking me all over the place, literally around the world, because his victims are scattered all around the world. They've got very serious cases from what they've been telling me, so I've got to meet them, take their instructions, advise them, and then pursue their cases. And there is a Jersey link. We know that Savile was a regular visitor to the island, and he sadly went to Haut-de-Garenne on at least one occasion. We know that. I'm certainly aware that there are out there victims from the island. I've met 2 so far, and I'm aware that there are others, but whether they're going to come forward and bring cases or not, too early to say.
These are civil matters. You're pursuing the estate of Jimmy Savile, wherever that might be, as far as I understand it. Does that, we've discussed it before, like remember, does that raise any jurisdictional problems?
Not really, because the victims are far and wide. The majority of them are on the mainland. The bulk of Savile's estate is in the UK, and so the UK would be the natural place to bring any proceedings anyway. So the fact that there are individuals with their own cases who are not in the UK is probably immaterial.
There's no need, therefore, for any police involvement at all in the cases you're interested in bringing. They are civil matters.
Well, there's Operation U-Tree, which is ongoing, although I understand it's probably coming towards an end. So that's run by the Metropolitan Police. They have quite a number of officers on the case investigating the various complaints. I'm certainly aware that they have not yet spoken to quite a lot of people with allegations. So quite what's going to happen there I do not know. Given that Savile's dead, quite clearly, there's no one to prosecute. So I suspect the police are interested in understanding the extent of the alleged crimes, and also they need to know whether anyone else was involved. And we've been hearing over recent weeks various accounts of people being arrested.
Yes,
so on. So where that's all going to end up, who knows?
That presumably could have implications, conspiracies or whatever, some arrangement where there was a joint activity going on. That is conceivable. But how would that reflect in the Channel Islands? Is it conceivable that could have a reflection?
Not that I'm aware of. I think from what I can make out, Savile was an opportunist, he was a risk taker, and if an opportunity presented to interfere with a child, he took up that opportunity. It doesn't matter where it was, whether it was England, Jersey, wherever. I think it was the geographical dimension was for him irrelevant.
The fact that new names seems to be arising all the time, and obviously there have been some unfortunate ones named by peoples who were not in fact involved in any activity, sexual activity against children. But the fact that new names are being revealed, I mean, obviously we can't guess where it's going to lead, but the implications are quite enormous, really, aren't they? Because there are names in the establishment which are being referred to, in the UK especially.
Well, I do not act for any of the people who made the allegations which I think you're referring to, so I know no more than you or anybody else who reads the newspapers and follows the television. So it is curious as to what's been going on, and it is interesting to think, well, where on earth is this going to all end up next? Whether there's going to be prosecutions, trials, who knows? Especially
if you look at places like Belgium, there's been extraordinary scandals. Spain, I think there's a scandal been going on, and it's very much government involvement. And people in government, people in authority, people with status, powerful people. And it does seem to be a part of the characteristic of sexual abuse of children. It seems to finish up there, doesn't it?
Well, it's an interesting point. It's also an interesting question. Like with Savile, you know, he was very well connected, and he was a very clever man, and he seems to have been able to perhaps exploit his connections. Doesn't necessarily mean that those who were being used by him were in the know. There's certainly no evidence of that at this stage, but there's certainly, I think, clear indications that he was adept at exploiting his associations with very powerful and influential people. Generally speaking, people who abuse children are clever, because that's part of the dynamic. This is why they're able to get away with what they do, and often for so long, if not for always. They tend to be very clever people, cunning, selfish, and Savile sort of fits those stereotypes, in my opinion. And so you can see how he would have been able to have manipulated situations and take advantage of them.
Another characteristic which I think we discussed in our last interview is that no matter how much regulation you've got, people like Savile just seem to be able to walk through all the regulations.
Well, again, interesting point, interesting question, because what concerns me is that over the decades there have been XYZ inquiries following some terrible child abuse scandal, yet lessons do not get learned. I think as a society we still struggle with the concept of child abuse. I think perhaps we're more willing to recognise it and talk about it, but there's still, maybe subconsciously, a desire to brush it all under the carpet, to ignore it and not just don't want to face up to it. And that could well have been the situation with Savile, because he was able to abuse decade after decade. So I'm hoping that as a result of all the Savile exposure, which has been good in a sense because it's got people talking, that as a society we will be more open to the risks of child abuse and not be so dismissive, because you get time and time again situations where children have said something about being abused, and it's, don't be stupid.
Well, extraordinarily.
And so on. Don't talk about all this kind of stuff. Brush it under the carpet.
Extraordinarily, we've just had a successful prosecution against an old man of 77 who had been an ex-centenaire, which is the local honorary policeman, respectable pillar of the society, the classic figure, successfully prosecuted for child abuse and waiting to be sentenced now. But there were, even at the end of that trial, there were people giving character references, notably several people from the church. And you, obviously, the church is supposed to be generous, forgive your sins and so on. But you do wonder about the role of people in those sort of authoritative positions, acting that way, in that... Is it, I mean, obviously there was a contradiction there, but how do you feel about that?
Well, again, an interesting point, an interesting question. Yes, when I'm looking at cases, I struggle to understand the attitude sometimes. I really do. Victims quite often find themselves at the end of the queue when it comes to help, sympathy, and so on. And a lot of effort seems to be expended on the abuser. It's odd, and I struggle to understand the mentality behind that sometimes, because it's all out of proportion. It seems to be the wrong way round. You know, the effort and the sympathy should be revolving around the victims, not the abuser.
There does seem to be, I mean, this is the old man, he's 77, and there is remarkable public sympathy for him as an old man. And it's, I suppose we are to be sympathetic to elderly people, but it's difficult to know where sympathy should end and the reality of what they might have done has to go to them.
My answer to that would be is yes, we're supposedly civilised human beings and we're supposed to be humane. So yes, you have to deal with the situation, you know, the case that you're talking about. Yes, you have to deal with that in a humane way, but at the same time you can't do that at the expense, in my opinion, of the victims.
How many cases have you actually got now in Jersey regarding Mr. Savile?
I have 2 Jersey victims. I do not expect that number to increase, although it could, because I am aware from what witnesses have told me that there are other people who were abused by Savile. But what action these people will take, I do not know. They might not take any action.
The two cases you've got, could that be implications in that for the government of Jersey, or is it strictly a civil matter between you and the estate? Or
Too early to say.
But in theory, there is a possibility. I mean, that could happen. In other cases, that sort of thing could happen.
It's too early to say, because you have to analyse the circumstances. A couple of weeks ago, I did an appeal for information to try and understand what Savile was actually doing here, who was facilitating his charity work and so on. Because, you know, he didn't just land on Jersey from Mars and go off and do horrible things to kids. And the more I learn about Savile, the more complex it becomes. He did not operate in an ordinary way, if I can put it like that. So there's some ongoing inquiries.
Has it, that case has arisen, so, and that's obviously focused attention, refreshed the whole issue. Has it helped with your other cases, the Haute-Lagrange-centred cases in Jersey?
Publicity is always useful because it reminds everybody that there are these victims out there and they have got to be looked after. They need justice, and that needs to be delivered. So it's, in a way, a useful reminder.
Are all the cases that you've got with the Jersey ones, the Haute-Lagrange related cases, are they all likely to come to a satisfactory conclusion as far as compensation is concerned?
That is my intention.
And is there any difficulty on that at the moment?
Let's put it this way, there are always bumps in the road, but my job is to iron out the bumps.
Would you say that the authorities here are getting more cooperative?
Let's put it this way, I think they know that I'm a very determined individual.
The jurisdictional question we discussed the last time, you're an English lawyer operating in Jersey. The local lawyers have got this total monopoly about advising people on Jersey law. Has that arisen as a problem in the Savile case?
No. Child abuse doesn't know boundaries. And the Savile case, for example, involved many continents, many countries, and the issues remain the same. And as I said, child abuse knows no boundaries, and for me, my job is to make sure that the victims that I act for get justice.
There are links, and the Welsh, Northern Wales case has been revived. There are aspects about it unresolved. I mean, people talk about extraordinary conspiracy theories. Do you see any links between these various hotspots of child abuse?
I'm not into conspiracies myself. However, it is not unusual in my experience for a paedophile to have links with other paedophiles, and you do get cases where you can link abuse between one institution and another because of the activities of the abusers involved. Quite often they move from place to place and they have like-minded associates, if I can put it like that, who also move from place to place. And so yes, in that sense you get hotspots and you get links, but to talk about conspiracies, no, I think that's beside the point.
Something we touched on last time you were here, you've got a large knowledge, you've accumulated in this particular area, you've been dealing with these cases for quite some years. You've got knowledge to impart. Nobody from the Jersey establishment had asked you to come and share that knowledge with them, give some talks, give some tutorials. Has it changed? Anybody expressed any interest?
No, I haven't had a Christmas card from them yet, yeah, got a great island here, great people, and I'm always open to invitations.
Well, perhaps we better...
But I won't be standing by the front door waiting for the invite to fall through the letterbox when
I
the husband
mean,
calls.
in all seriousness, do you think that would be a useful exercise? You've got knowledge. Have you got things you could explain and clarify?
Savile has shown that when people can drop the reserve, you can have a sensible dialogue and learn. What is interesting, I've witnessed with Savile, is that people have felt empowered to talk about their own experiences. And I have been part of conversations, private conversations, where you hear things from people that they would probably have never have mentioned had it not been for the Savile exposure. So that demonstrates to me that there is a lot of secrets out there, and that those secrets need to be heard for the sake of the people concerned, and also, of equal importance, the lessons to be learned, and as a society, for us to improve child protection.
Thank you much indeed.